Okay, so let me get this straight. Trump's former personal lawyer wants to run the entire Justice Department, and Republicans want to bury the oversight hearing inside his confirmation. Watch Whitehouse refuse to let it slide. Subscribe now.
I'd like to take my time this morning to suggest that combining our oversight hearing of the Department of Justice with the nominations hearing for Acting Attorney General Blanche would be a grave mistake for the committee. I don't believe we did that with Attorney General Garland, and I think the record of the Department of Justice under Todd Blanche lends itself to very vigorous oversight. Oversight which we have been denied because when we ask questions, we get scripted litanies of insult and quarrel rather than actual answers to our questions. When we ask for documents and records in writing, we get nothing. We are reduced to filing FOIA requests that are then not even complied with as FOIA requests. So the oversight function of this committee is really, I think, being systematically disabled. That's particularly significant when you have Attorney General Bondi saying that it was Todd Blanche who was responsible for the Epstein files disaster, the releases of private information and images of victims, the cover-up of documents that named Donald Trump, and just the general incompetence of the whole wretched mess. I don't think that it would be a good idea for this committee to be complicit in covering up the cover-up of the Epstein files. Move on to the slush fund, which a great number of my Republican colleagues have expressed real reservations about, with its attachment of a tax amnesty deal for Trump, the Trump family, and the Trump businesses. There are very legitimate questions to be asked about that, including, has that cockamamie idea really been withdrawn, or is it just being hidden briefly so it can resurface in some other fashion? We should be looking into this as a committee. It's important stuff. And even if we shirk our duties at looking into all of this, it appears that a Florida court is going to be looking into all of this. And I think it's a bad look for the committee to be turning a blind eye to what went into the slush fund deal and the tax amnesty deal, and then discover through a court proceeding in Florida all the stuff that we failed to look at. It's hard to be taken seriously if we have failed to do our own duty, and then the court proceedings reveal the mischief. I will say that I've looked. I have never, ever heard of senior officials of the Department of Justice being called before a court with respect to a fraud upon the court. Look up fraud upon a court. It's a pretty serious charge. This one was raised, I guess I should say, by 3 dozen retired federal judges, some very, very respected ones, some very, very conservative ones. And the judge in the proceeding in Florida, out of which the slush fund settlement emerged, reopened the case to have a look. She asked for responses. She suggested that the DOJ might have violated its own policies in this settlement. She suggested that there was an IRS defense memo out there that would be relevant to the proceedings. The violation of DOJ policies would obviously be a matter for DOJ to answer. The IRS client memo would obviously be something for DOJ to answer. She also questioned whether there was collusion. It takes two to collude. It would be a collusion between the Department of Justice lawyers and Trump's private lawyers. So there's another reason for the Department of Justice to have responded. What happened last Friday? No response from the Department of Justice. First ever accusation of senior level Department of Justice people of fraud upon the court with an invitation to rebut the allegations, an invitation specific to Department of Justice conduct, and they duck. So that is going to continue. The 36 judges have their answer this Friday, and then the court will go forward. I will contend that we don't look like much if that information is being developed in a federal courtroom and we haven't been allowed to ask questions, and indeed our oversight has been collapsed into a confirmation hearing. I have never seen a Department of Justice as badly run as this one. I've never seen fraud upon the court allegations. I've never seen so many suggestions of contempt. I've never seen so many no true bills. I've never seen so many cases thrown out. I've never seen so many accusations that department arguments were false, were pretextual, were designed to fool rather than inform the court. And we see that over and over again from judges appointed by every president. It is now at the point where the Department of Justice and the U.S. government have lost their presumption of regularity in federal court proceedings. All of this matters. All of this is something to which this committee should be paying attention. And with respect to what our chairman has said about the norms of the committee, well, one norm is that U.S. attorneys come through this committee after a process of consultation before they get to run U.S. Attorney's office. Over and over again, we see these slippery deals where acting U.S. attorneys are appointed, and then the first assistant is fired, and when the time runs out on the acting U.S. attorney, they slip back into the first attorney position and leave a vacancy. It's an obvious scam to get around this committee's norms. And we have put up with this. It didn't happen once, it didn't happen twice, it has happened over and over and over and over again. And on top of that, we've seen U.S. attorneys called out for misconduct over and over and over again. None of this is normal. None of this is normal. And the fact that this committee won't look into it, I think, is a shame. And I think if we try to be complicit in failing in our duty to look into this by combining the Blanche nomination hearing with the Department of Justice oversight hearing, we will have made a very, very grave mistake. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, so let's talk about what we just watched. Todd Blanche, Trump's old personal defense lawyer, is now acting attorney general, heading into a confirmation fight in mid-July to take the job permanently. And it is not smooth. Even Republicans on the Judiciary Committee, Cornyn, Tillis, Murkowski, Collins, are undecided, openly asking whether a man this close to Trump can be independent. Here's the math that matters. Democrats are unified against him, so Blanche needs all 12 Republicans to advance. That is exactly why this fight is happening now. And this is the move Whitehouse just called out. The committee wants to fold its Justice Department oversight hearing into Blanche's confirmation hearing. Same room, same day, one event. He calls it a grave mistake, and he's right. When they ask questions, they get scripted insults instead of answers. When they ask for documents, they get nothing. The oversight function is being switched off on purpose. And look at what they want to switch off. Former Attorney General Pam Bondi testified that she handed the entire Epstein files rollout to Todd Blanche. So the botched release lands on the man now asking for a promotion. The department over-redacted some documents while accidentally exposing the identities and personal information of Epstein's victims, survivors who say they were re-traumatized. Blanche himself admitted the department failed to protect their privacy. That is not a small detail. That is the nominee admitting the failure under oath. That is why Whitehouse used the phrase he used. He said, "The committee should not be complicit in covering up the cover-up of the Epstein files." Think about that for a second. The releases that exposed victims, the documents that name Donald Trump getting buried, and the proposed fix is to skip the oversight hearing entirely. They don't want the questions on camera. The dodge is the strategy. Then there's the money. In January 2026, Trump sued the IRS over leaks of his tax returns. And that lawsuit quietly produced a settlement, creating a roughly $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund. Critics call it a slush fund for Trump and his supporters. And here's the kicker. The very next day, Blanche ordered the IRS to permanently end audits of the Trump family, a tax amnesty deal. Even Senator Tillis says it has to be effectively dead before any confirmation. So, naturally, the plan is to not look into it. And Whitehouse asks the obvious question: has that idea really been withdrawn, or is it just hidden so it can resurface later? Because if the committee shirks its duty, a Florida court is going to dig into all of it anyway. His point is simple. It is a bad look to turn a blind eye to a billion-dollar deal and then have the court reveal everything you refused to examine. And the court is already moving. More than 36 retired federal judges, including prominent conservatives, asked Judge Kathleen Williams in Florida to reopen Trump's IRS case, alleging the settlement was a fraud on the court. Their claim: it was never actually filed with the judge before Trump dismissed his own lawsuit. She reopened the case, ordered responses, and flagged an IRS memo and possible DOJ policy violations. Fraud upon the court is one of the most serious charges in the system. This is not Democrats saying it, it's the judges. And here's the part Whitehouse drives home. The judge questioned whether there was collusion, and it takes two to collude. That collusion would be between Justice Department lawyers and Trump's private lawyers. The court invited the department to rebut the fraud allegations directly. Last Friday was the deadline. The response? Nothing. They ducked. When you have the facts on your side, you answer. You don't go silent. And that silence fits the pattern. Whitehouse says this is the worst-run Justice Department he has ever seen. Fraud upon the court allegations, suggestions of contempt, cases thrown out, and judges appointed by presidents of both parties repeatedly accusing department lawyers of arguments that were false, pretextual, or designed to mislead the court. The result, he argues, is that the department has lost its presumption of regularity. The basic trust courts extend to government lawyers by default. That trust is gone. And listen to how he frames it. He has never seen a Justice Department run this badly. Never seen this many cases thrown out. This many judges from both parties calling the department's arguments false or pretextual. That is why he says the government has lost the benefit of the doubt courts normally give. When even the courts stop trusting your lawyers, that is the whole story in one line. And here's the last receipt. The norm is simple. U.S. attorneys come through this committee before they run an office. Instead, interim appointees hit their time limit, get quietly slipped into first assistant roles, and automatically reclaim the top job for another 210 days, skipping the Senate completely. It happened with Alina Habba in New Jersey, where judges chose a career prosecutor only to watch her fired hours later. Multiple federal judges have ruled it unlawful. So here's the line. Next time someone says, "This is just normal politics," ask them why the plan is to avoid every question, every document, and every court. They wanted the rubber stamp. Whitehouse put the record on the table instead. Full stop. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.